Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, as you can tell from the camera zoomed out and the very large heavy box on my workbench, we are going to be building this transparent Porsche 911 boxer motor from Franzis. Now if you remember a few months back, I built the Ford Mustang V8 motor from Franzis, and that was a really awesome kit. This looks to be of the same quality. In fact, this is their latest version of this kit with some different colored parts and a little more realistic looking. So I'm excited to build this kit. I want to thank my friends over at Makerhaus for sending this into the channel for review. And if you'd like to pick up one of these, I'll leave a link in the description below and also a scannable barcode on the screen here that you can scan with your tablet or phone, and it'll take you right to a place where you can buy one of these for yourself. Now, just like the other kit, I'm going to do this step by step. There's no gluing or no painting required. However, I may want to do a little customization on this one just for myself, but otherwise it's going to be pretty straightforward. Before we get into the build, I just want to say to all my current subscribers, thank you so much for supporting the channel and subscribing and tuning in all the time. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And if this is your first time on the channel, welcome, and thanks for tuning in. If you don't mind, please take a moment and click that subscribe button down below. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, please be sure to check out my affiliate links down in the description. I'll also put up a scannable QR code that takes you to a links page with all my links listed, just to make it a little easier. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get to the build. Alright, so this is a 1/4 scale model of the classic 1966 Porsche flat 6 engine. As I said, this kit has moving parts, lights, and sound, and the casting, a lot of the casting is transparent, so you can actually see the parts moving inside. And just like the last kit we did like this one comes with a collectible manual with all kinds of information about the engine and Porsche, and apparently it was actually written by the Porsche Museum, so that's pretty cool. Now, the first 911 was introduced back in 1963. It was a 2.0 liter flat 6 boxer engine, air-cooled and remounted. So the original engine had about 130 horsepower with a top speed of 130 miles an hour. That 2.0 liter engine was used until 1971 when it was reworked into a 2.7 liter engine with 210 horsepower. And the final air-cooled version of this engine was used all the way up until 1997, and it had grown in size to a 3.6 liter. The new water-cooled version was a 3.4 liter with 200 horsepower, and it was introduced in the Porsche 911 996. So on the box, we have a pretty nice picture of a completed kit, or at least we can see part of it. Some information. Again, the information is in English and in German. The side of the box, a little better picture of the completed kit. Same here, side view of the kit, another view, and the other side of the kit. On the back of the box, we have some more information about the Porsche Flat 6 Boxer engine, some pictures of some vintage Porsches, all the parts laid out, and this is an official Porsche registered product, so that's nice. Here's a picture of that shows the Boxer layout of the 6 cylinders, and a notation here about the manual. Again, everything on here is in English and in German. All right, so now that we've covered all that, let's get this box opened and see what's inside. Okay, first we have our manual. Very nice looking, pretty thick. Has a kind of a cutaway view of a Porsche there, the front and the back. Okay, let's get this cut open and take a look at it. All right, I had to move the box out of the way because, as I said, it's a pretty big box and I have limited space in my workbench, but here we have the full view of that back and front cover. That looks really cool. Have our assembly instructions. Just go through some of these real quick. Some nice photos. Oh yeah. Really nice looking book. Nice photos. The racing Porsche, off-road. Here's our content of parts. This is more about the engine. Okay, and then we get into the assembly instructions. As I said, we're going to go through this step by step. And we have some more information on the rally cars. And we're continuing with the assembly. So the assembly instructions in this manual are kind of broken up, so that's interesting. The previous one, all of the instructions were at the back, and they were all, from start to finish. This has them split up through the book, it looks like, which is fine. All right. Oh, those are some nice photos there. More assembly. All right. Okay, now, as I did before with the last one, I'm not going to go through all the parts in the box because we are going to go through step by step and do the assembly. And once again, I want to say thank you to my friends over at Makerhaus for sending this in to the channel for review. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. And without further ado, let's get to the build. Okay, friends, before we get started, we need to open up this one bag here that has some parts we're going to need for it before we can get into the actual build. So in this bag, we have our head gaskets. We also have our bag of screws, which is very important. We don't want to lose these. I suggest you get a cup with a lid and put your screws in there once you take them out of the bag, so you tend to not lose them that way. Here we have our metal shafts. Here we have some assorted sprockets that we're going to use. Set those aside. We have a short steel shaft that is keyed. We have a rubber belt. We have another shaft with our springs on it, and this is very important. Do not lose these springs and be careful. When you take these off, they will go flying if you're not careful. We have what I believe is a part to hold the spark plug wires. And we have the screwdriver that they send with the kit. Now, just like with my other model like this, I use my own screwdriver only because it's got a better grip and I can control it a little better. In my previous build, I did show you that I did have to use this for some really recessed screws that my other screwdriver wouldn't fit into, so definitely don't toss this, hold on to it. So let me clear off the bench, we're going to get some parts and get started with our first stage. All right, we're going to start off with stage 1, steps 1 through 3. Now in this stage, we're going to be assembling our pistons and push rods. We're going to be adding them to the crankshaft, and then we're going to add a drive gear to that. Okay, for step 1, we're going to need our piston halves and our push rods. Now to get these parts off these sprues, you're going to need a good set of nippers or just a really nice set of cutters, a hobby knife, and it would also be a good idea to have a couple different grades of sanding sticks. Now you can just use sandpaper or whatever you have, but a lot of these parts are going to be moving, so we want to make sure there's no burrs left on them so that they can easily move around inside the engine. Okay, so now we've got all our parts cut off the sprues. We're going to take a sanding stick, and as you can see, there's some leftover plastic where we cut these parts off. So you can take a nipper and you can clean it up, and then take a sanding stick and really quickly knock those burrs down. Make sure you get them on both sides. And now that one's ready to go. On these piston pins, where you cut them off the sprue, there may be a little lip there. Just lightly sand both ends. And I like to go around the outer edge so it's nice and clean, because those are going to be going into the piston halves and through the rod. For the pistons, You want to clean this off on the top, and then also on the sides where the sprue was. Okay, for these assemblies you need 4 parts. You need both halves of your piston, the connecting rod, and the pin. Take your pin, place it in one side of one of the piston halves, and this just pressure fits in. Take your connecting rod, slip it over that. Take the other half of your piston, line up your pegs with that center post, and basically squeeze them together. Now, when you squeeze them together, they'll have a little bit of a snap, but you want to make sure that they're nice and connected all the way around with no gaps. Now, if you feel a bit of a ridge on the sides here, just take your sanding stick and just lightly sand it, and that little lip will go away, and then it'll be nice and smooth. And there we have our first piston. Now I'm going to assemble the rest of the pistons. I'll be right back. Now we are going to start attaching our pistons to the crankshaft. To do this, we're going to take each piston and one of the piston end caps, and these are going to fit through the crank, and this cap will sit on top, and we'll use 2 screws in each to attach them. So let's start with this back one here. So we'll set that one there. Put the end cap on. Get a couple screws here, and we'll just get them started. There's 2. And we want to make sure these are nice and tight, but they are going into plastic, so you don't want to over tighten them and strip them. And once you have that, you have your piston on the crank. So I'm going to do the rest of these, so I'm going to do a time lapse, and when we're done, I'll come back. Okay, and there we have all 6 pistons on the crankshaft. Okay, for this step, we are going to take our drive gear, part number 68, and we're just going to place it on the end of the crankshaft on the short end here. And it just snaps on like that. And that is the end of that step, and that is the end of this stage. Okay, in section 2, we are going to be adding this assembly to the bottom of the engine block. This is part number 47. Now, before I show you that, step 5 of this is going to be installing the cylinders. So I want to show you this because you won't be able to see it as clear. If you'll notice, in the block, there are 2 cutouts on each side. So when you go to assemble these, there is a key part here. You can see that rib. That has to go into those slots. So when we get to that point, you're basically going to sit this in here, get the pistons located in, and then just push it down. You have to make sure that that key is in the right position, otherwise it's not going to fit right. Okay, but before that, back to step 4. So we want to have the engine block situated this way. Now, this is going to be kind of fiddly because you've got all these loose pistons, but what you want to do is get them oriented in the way they need to be. You can see there's an offset here. This piston's over here, while this one's over here. It's an offset all the way. And then what I find is easiest to do is just gather up your pistons like so. And then we're just going to set this in the block like that. And it may take a couple tries, but eventually the pistons should just sit down in their places, and you can see this rod will go in this little cutout here, as will this one in the back. What we're going to do now is step 5. Step 5 is adding the cylinders. Now this is part 49. There are 2 of them and they are both labeled part 49. And as I said, they are keyed. So the best way to do this is to hold this in place, get these cylinders, or the pistons, started in the cylinders, and then just push it down. And now that's in place. Now we're going to take the other cylinder assembly, and again, making sure our key is facing down. And we're going to do the same thing over here. And there you have it. They're pressed in place. These are just friction fit for now. And as you can see, if you turn this, the pistons move back and forth. So that's the end of these steps, and that's the end of this stage. Okay, for stage 3, we're going to be adding the rear of the crankcase, and then we're going to be closing up the crankcase with part number 48. So now we're going to bring over our current crankcase assembly, and we are going to take this, the rear of the crankcase assembly, which is part number 56. Now, this only goes in one way. If you'll see here, there is a key notch here. And inside the crankcase, there is a place where that needs to sit. So we want to put it in just like this. Make sure that that key lines up in the bottom and snap it in place. And that's the end of that part. Now moving on to step 7, we're going to be closing up the crankcase, and we are going to use part 48. So this just simply goes on like this. Make sure you've got everything lined up, and your pistons should be able to move freely. And we're going to seal this up with 7 screws. All right, now these screws have to go all the way down inside of here. So this is actually one of those situations where you're going to want to use this screwdriver that came with the kit, because it is long enough to reach down inside there and tighten those screws. So we're going to go ahead and put these screws in. Now when I'm doing larger areas like this, I like to get all of the screws started, and then I'll come back around and tighten them up in a crisscross pattern to make sure that everything gets lined up. All right, now that those are all in, let's double check, make sure everything looks good, and it does. So we're going to start tightening these up. Once again, these are going into plastic, so you do not want to over tighten them, but they do need to be pretty tight. All right, we'll go over and make sure we got them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, and now we have our crankcase sealed up. Our pistons still move freely within the crankcase, so that is the end of that step, and that's the end of this stage. Okay, now we're moving on to stage 4 and steps 8 and 9. Now what we're going to be doing here is setting up the cylinder heads. So we've got a couple parts here, and they're the same numbers for each side. So this is going to be number 51. This is number 54. And this is number 55. Okay, so when you're assembling these parts, they have to go in exactly the right way. So you want to pay close attention to how you're doing this. So for this part number 54, you want to have these notches facing up and these holes facing down inside of the cylinder head. Also, you want to have these oil return lines at the top. And basically, inside here, you're going to see some notches or some holes where these notches will go into. And then it's going to snap on top of these two areas right here. So to do this, we just stick this in here, line it up in the slots on both sides, make sure they are in there and straight, and then snap it in place. And that one's done. Now for part number 55, pretty much the same thing. It's just a different part, but you want to make sure these protrusions go inside the cylinder head. So we will line up our tabs with our slots, like so, and snap it in. All right, and that cylinder head is done. Now I'm going to do the other cylinder head. Okay, same steps as before. All right, well, it's in there. Now let's do this one. All right. Okay, and there we have our two cylinder heads assembled, and that's the end of that step. Okay, for step 9, we're going to do the valve assembly. Okay, now I've got all my valves and my valve stem pieces cut off. Now these are all the same parts. Sometimes your exhaust valve and your intake valve will be different sizes, but on this one they're all the same. We also have our valve springs here on these rails that we're going to be very careful not to lose. So basically, you're going to take your cylinder head, and we're going to take a valve stem, place it over there, and simply pass this through one of these, and you'll see it sticking up on this side, and then just take your valve and snap it on the end. Now these are kind of small, so you want to make sure they're on there, but be careful. And there you have your valve stem assembly for that one. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these. Okay, now we have all of our valves installed in our heads, and that is the end of that step, and this is the end of this stage. Okay, for stage 5, steps 10 and 11, we are going to be installing the oil cooler, which is 2 pieces, part number 32 and 33, and then for step 11, we are going to be actually adding the cylinder heads right and left side to the engine block. To install the oil cooler, we need to bring our engine block back over, and on this side of the engine, if you've got it situated this way, there's a piece here that the oil cooler is going to snap over. So to do that, take part number 33, and we kind of want to sit it behind there in that slot there. Then we want to take part number 32 and just fit it over like so. Then squeeze it together, and then that's going to be held together with 2 screws. We'll put one in here, and one in here, just to get them started. And then we'll make sure they're nice and tight. All right. And that is the end of that step. Now on to step 11. We're going to be installing the cylinder head gasket, the oil return lines, and our right side head cylinder head, part number 51. So to do this step, you want to take our engine assembly here, and we want to kind of lean it on one side. You want to make sure you've got your oil cooler on this side. Then you want to take your head gasket. Now one side of the head gasket is white, one is just plain. You want the white side towards the engine block. So you just fit these over these posts. Make sure it's on there nice and flat. And then we're going to need these oil return lines. All right, so we'll set 2 aside. We'll take these 2. Now, there's a couple of little lugs right here, a couple of pins, and these just simply fit on that pin on either one, and they'll look like that. So after we get these in place, we're going to take our cylinder head, and remember, for this side, we're using cylinder head number 51, and it's labeled right here. All right, and then you want to make sure that these 3 larger posts are facing the top of the engine, so like this. So these 3 smaller ones are going to be at the bottom. So we just take our cylinder head and we're going to be putting it on these 4 lugs, and these 2 oil return lines are going to be going to these points in here. So we'll just set this on like this, make sure it's on there all the way, and then we're going to secure this with 4 screws. First screw we're going to put in the top left here, and I just want to get these started. I don't want to start tightening them up until we get them all in. All right, now that we've got those started, we want to kind of situate this so that our oil return lines are right in these 2 little notches here. Now they're just going to be kind of loose fitting for a while, but now we're going to take our screwdriver and we're going to tighten up these 4 cylinder head screws, and I like to do these in a crisscross pattern to make sure that it gets sit on there really well. Now as we tighten these up, these oil return lines are going to want to be held in place. All right, so that's all 4. Now we'll go around and we'll just tighten them up. Again, these are going into plastic, so you don't want to over tighten them, but you want to make sure they're nice and tight. All right, and that is that cylinder head on. Now we're going to do the same thing on the reverse side. So once again, we will put our head gasket on, white side down, our 2 oil return lines, like so, and then our second cylinder head, which is number 50. And we'll make sure that these are facing up. Set it on there like so. And just like on the other side, we're going to secure this with 4 screws. All right, our cylinder heads are now on the engine, and that is the last step, and that is the last step in this stage. For stage 6, we're going to be installing the camshaft tunnel on the right rear of our engine, and then we're going to be assembling the cam and rocker shaft for the right side. Now the parts that we're going to be using are these cams, and these have to go on in a specific order. I've already removed these from the sprue. This will be for the other side. On the sprue they're labeled F, E, and D, but they are also labeled on the individual, I don't know if you can see that, the individual cam has also the labeling for which letter it is. We will also need these 2 metal rods. Now, if you remember earlier, these are the rods that our valve springs were attached to. So we're going to use one of these. And the directions do not tell you what part number this is, but it's actually part number 12 on your sprue, and there are 2 of them. So we're just going to need 1. And then here's the other part, part number 60, which will be affixing to the engine block. Now, when you cut these parts off of the sprue, they're going to be a little rough. So you're going to want to take some sandpaper, and you're going to want to clean off the area where you cut them off the sprue to make sure they're nice and smooth. So for step 12, we're going to assemble our camshaft tunnel with part 60, and we're going to attach it to this side of the engine. So your oil cooler is back here, and you've got these little square nubs here that match up to this. So we're just going to place this on here like so, and we'll attach that with 2 screws. And that's it for that step. Next, we're going to assemble our camshaft. First, we're going to take our gear, and this is keyed, so you want to make sure you get it in. It'll only go in one way on this rod. Make sure it's on there all the way. And then we're going to take our cams. All right, we're going to start off with cam D. make sure that this is facing away from the sprocket. And again, these are keyed as well, so they should only slide on one way. And then we'll put on Cam E, make sure we got the right one. Yep. There we go. And finally, Cam F. All right. And that is our first cam assembled, and that is the end of that stage. Okay, for stage 7, we're going to be assembling our cam and rocker shafts for the right side, and then we're going to be actually putting the camshaft assembly into the right side cylinder head. Now for this step, we're going to need these 6 rocker arms, which are number 5 on the sprue, so we're going to clip those off. Also, your kit includes 4 of these shafts. They're all the same length and they're all completely round. These aren't keyed like the ones we used on our camshaft, so make sure you get the right ones. Now when you're placing these on, you want to take note, actually we only need 2 of those. When you're placing these on the rod, you want to take note. You want to have the longer part all going towards the same direction. All right, so there's our first one, and we'll do our second one. So when you're done, they should look like that. So for step 14, we're going to want to get our engine situated this way with our oil cooler right here. So to install a camshaft, you want to spread these out a little bit so there's a little bit of a gap in these. Now you've got a notch over on this side where the end of your shaft will go into, and then this part needs to set down in this section here. So we're just going to set it in there, kind of move this around a little bit, and just like that, our camshaft is installed. Okay, for stage 8, step 15, we're going to actually install our rocker shaft assembly onto the cylinder head and close it off with a cover. All right, so for this step, we're going to need our rocker arms we assembled in the previous stage, and we'll also need the upper cylinder cover, part number 53. So let's bring our engine back over here. Now install this top set. You want to make sure that your longer part of the rocker arm is facing up and the shorter part is facing down, and that the longer part is to the left of the lower one. So for this, we're just going to set these on here. All right, now that part is a little tricky to get on there because you've got the tension from the valve springs pushing up, but you want to make sure that each one of your rocker arms are sitting on that proper camshaft lobe. Then we're going to take our second rocker set, and it's basically just the opposite. You want the longer part of the rocker facing down. So let's get that in there. All right, and again, that's kind of challenging on that, but just be patient and you'll get it in there. All right, next we're going to take our top cylinder head cover and we're going to place it over the cylinder head and hold all of this in place. However, you want to make sure that your oil return lines are in place because they have to go, they have to go in these posts. So to put this on, you want to make sure that the part number is actually facing towards the front, towards the sprocket. We're going to place it over here like so. Being very careful. And we want to make sure our oil returns go in there. All right, and now it's on, and now we're going to secure this with 6 screws. Now I'm just going to get all 6 screws started, and then I'll go back and tighten everything up. All right, now that those are started, start in the middle. And once again, you're going into plastic, so don't crank down on these too hard, but you want to make sure they're on there nice and tight. And 6. And then just go around one time, make sure they're all nice and tight. All right. Now we've got our crankshaft assembled, and as you can see, when you turn it, the cam lobes are rotating and they're operating those rocker arms, which are opening and closing the valves. And that is the end of this stage. In step 9, we're basically going to repeat what we've already done to the first side of the engine to the other side. Now the one difference here is that on the camshaft, our cam lobes are labeled A, B, and C, and those have to go on in that order. Okay, so I've already got my parts. We've got our keyed shaft. We have A, B, and C, and this sprocket is the cam sprocket. It's part number 12. So we're going to get this installed in here. All right, now I will say on mine, this sprocket was very hard to get on here. So I used a little lubricant, just a little oil to get it to slip on a little better. But now that we have that on, we can add our cam lobes. So we're going to start with A. And again, we want to make sure that this little nib here is facing away from the sprocket. And again, these are keyed. There's A, B, and C. And that camshaft is ready to go. Okay, next we're going to build our rocker arms. And again, you want to have the long side facing one way and then facing up, and then they will all face the same way. Okay, next we are going to be adding number 59, and just like we did on the other side, this is going to fit right over these 2 posts right here. So we'll put that on there like so, and we'll attach that with 2 screws. This bottom one first, then the top one, and that's on there. Okay, next step, just like we did before, we're going to insert our camshaft. So you want to have these a little separated. The part with the gear is going to go on the end where we just installed that cover. And we want to get these to set down in between those like so. And there we have our camshaft in. Okay, now we'll see if we can get our rocker arms on. All right, that sets on. Now we'll do the other side. Flip it around here. All right, and there we go. Those are pretty tricky to get in there, I will say. So you're just going to have to be really patient when you're putting those on. And then finally, we're going to put our cover on. And again, these posts here need to go in the oil return tubes right there. So get that on there. Make sure everything is lined up. Turns are in. Our cam is turning and our rockers are rocking. Okay, now we're going to secure this with 6 screws. All right. And that's the end of those steps and the end of this stage. For section 10, step 17 and 18, we're going to be setting up the timing. So we have to get the ignition and the valve timing correct, and we have to match it to the crankshaft. So To do this, they give us some tools. So we're going to need a couple of timing pins. We're going to need that short metal rod that's keyed. And we're also going to need a couple of sprockets. So for our sprockets, this is B75 and this one is B10. Now this one's labeled on the part, but this one is not. Here is our metal rod that is keyed. And here are our special timing tools. And what these are going to do is they're going to hold everything in place while we set up the timing belts and get everything put together. Okay, in order to do this step, the first thing you need to do is identify piston 4 and piston 1, because these have to be at top dead center, which means that both pistons will be all the way out on either side. Right here on the crank, you can see there's a hole in the crankcase and a hole in that counterweight on the crank. That's what our timing pin's going to go through. So our first step is going to be lining those up and taking a timing tool and placing it right in here. Next, we're going to take our small sprocket, which is keyed, and we're going to place it over the crank, and it should set flush against the back of the engine block. Make sure your timing pin's in there, that your lock pin is in there. Now, the next step says to put this pin in here and then put the gear on it, but I find that it's easier because to line up this sprocket, you have to mesh the teeth with this sprocket, but if you'll look, there is an additional hole here on the sprocket, and that is what the timing tool is going to go through, and then it's going to pass through that and into the crankcase. So I just find it's easier to take your sprocket and place it over this post here with your hole at the bottom and get your teeth on those two sprockets to mesh first. Now we can put our timing tool in that hole, and then we can put and this is keyed, so you'll have to rotate it until you get it in there right, and then just put the pin in. For stage 11, we're going to continue with the valve timing on the left-hand side of the engine. We're going to use a special timing tool that they supply in the kit, and that's going to allow us to line up and sync the crank with the left camshaft sprocket. Then we're going to add the timing belt, and we're going to remove one of these timing pins that we put in earlier. So for steps 19 and 20, we're going to this is the timing tool they supply with the kit. This is an idler pulley that we'll use, and this is the timing belt. So we'll bring our engine back over here. Now, on this sprocket, there are some holes in this large sprocket that will match up with the pegs on this timing tool. There's 2 in this sprocket, but there's 3 in this sprocket. So what you want to do is kind of get them close. We're going to put this end of the tool in these 2 holes on this sprocket. And then on this side, we're going to rotate this camshaft until these 3 holes line up with the pegs on the tool. And the tool is now in place. So this and this cannot move. We want to double check our valves to make sure they are both closed, and they are. Now for step 20, we need to remove this timing pin on top right here. Then we're going to take our belt. So we want to get our belt on that small sprocket on this end. And then on this end, we want to stretch it over the sprocket for the camshaft. Now, see this post right here? The belt needs to be on this side of the post because we're going to take our idler pulley and put that over that post and under the belt. So when you're done, it should look like this. And that's the end of those steps, and that's the end of this stage. Okay, for section 12, we're going to be finishing up the timing assembly for the left side of the engine and adding a timing cover. We're also going to be removing one of those timing pins. And then step 22, we're going to install the distributor drive gears. Now, these consist of several parts, but we want to be very careful when we're installing them and pay close attention, as this will affect the operation of the engine once it's all together. So for step 21, we're going to use the timing cover, part number 61. Bring our engine back over here. Now, before we put the timing cover on, we need to remove this timing pin from the middle sprocket down here on the crank at the bottom. So we'll just grab that timing pin and pull it out. And it's in there pretty good, so you might need yourself a pair of tweezers. There we go. That timing pin is out. Okay, now that we've got that timing pin out, we need to remove our timing tool. So we'll just lift up on that. Now you want to be careful at this point not to turn anything, because even though this side will stay in time, this side will not. So you want to make sure you don't turn anything. Now we'll take our timing cover, number 61, and we'll place it over this like so. Line it up on the lugs, press it in place, and then we'll secure this with 3 screws. For step 22, we're going to need these 2 beveled gears. This one is part 76, and this one is part 69. We will also need to reuse one of these timing tools. So our first step is to take the small gear, place it over the crank, and this is keyed, so it'll only go on one way. Make sure it sets all the way down in here. Now this second one, there is a flat spot on this sprocket on this side on the shaft. That's important. That's where our alignment pin tool is going to go to hold that in place. So what we want to do is we want to take this gear and put it in here in this little cradle right here. And you want to make sure those teeth are meshing. And then our timing tool is just going to go between this side of that cradle and that flat spot on the sprocket. Now, with that timing tool in there, that sprocket can't move, and neither can the small one. And with that, that's the end of this stage. In section 13, we're going to add our timing tool to set up the valve timing for the opposite side of the engine and add our timing belt. Now this is pretty much very similar to what we did in the previous stages, it's just on the other side of the engine. So for stage 12, we're going to need our timing tool, our second timing chain belt, our idler pulley, and our second camshaft sprocket. Okay, so let's bring our engine back over here. You want to be careful not to disturb anything right here because you don't want this to fall out. So first we are going to take our cam sprocket, and this is going to go right on top of this short metal pin here, and it is keyed. So it'll only go on one way, like so. So then we want to take our timing tool and we will place the 3 pins in the 3 holes on the camshaft, and the other 2 go in the 2 pins on the crank sprocket. Now we're going to add our timing belt. So once again, just get this started over here. Stretch it around on this end. Okay, it's a pretty snug fit. You want to make sure it's on there. And then again, you need to make sure your belt is on this side of this post. And then we take our idler pulley, we place it on there. And that's the end of that step. And that's the end of that stage. For section 14, we're going to install the cam belt cover, which will finish off our timing setup, and then we're going to start working on the distributor. So for this step, we're going to use part number 62, and we'll bring our engine back over. Now, for this step, we're going to need to remove our little timing tool, our little placeholder tool that we put in on this sprocket. So we're going to pull that out, being careful not to move anything around. We're also going to remove our timing tool from this cam side. And then we're going to take this part and we're just simply going to carefully place it on top and seal all this up. Make sure everything's on and lined up. And then we're going to seal this with 3 screws. Now, I do want to point out that these screws go in here pretty deep, so I'm not going to be able to use my bigger screwdriver, and unfortunately I seem to have misplaced the screwdriver that came with the kit. So I am using this smaller screwdriver to get these screws started. Make sure all those are nice and tight. And that's the end of that step. And I think it's safe that we can remove our markings for our cylinders for number 4 and number 1 now. Okay, now we're going to move on to our distributor. And for this, we are going to need our distributor. This little bush is what they call it, but I think it's supposed to be a bushing, I'm not sure, or just an extension for the distributor. But basically, we're going to fit this over the shaft of our distributor. Now this is keyed, and also on one side there's a cutout where the screw will sit in, and the other side is flat. So you want to make sure the flat side goes towards the distributor. So we'll put this on here, like so, and then we'll secure that with 1 screw. There we go. All right. And that's the end of that step, and that's the end of this stage. Moving on to section 15, we are going to be inserting the distributor into the crankcase and getting that lined up. Now remember, that beveled gear in there must be in the right position, and the distributor has that bushing we added to the end of it that will fit inside here and mesh with that gear. Then we're going to be installing the front cover for the engine, and then finally we'll be adding a crankshaft pulley. So let's get our engine over here, line this up. Then we will take our distributor, and we want to kind of just straighten these wires out a little bit. Now again, on this end we have this little bush that needs to line up this way with the distributor. And then you can see the hole here. It's keyed as well. So we're going to turn our distributor over like this, and we are going to slip it in there like so. Make sure it's set all the way in. And there we go. This is just friction fit for now. So once it's in there, just make sure that everything looks like it's in all the way, and it is. And that's the end of that step. Next, we're going to take part number 63, and we're going to set it to the front of the engine here. So this is going to fit over the front of the engine, and we're going to secure that with 3 screws. Next, we're going to take our crankshaft pulley, part number 25, and we're going to place that over the end of our crankshaft, just like that, and we're going to secure it with 1 screw. Just like that. And that's the end of that step, and that's the end of that stage. For section 16, we're going to be adding the electric drive motor to the bottom of the engine, and then we're going to be adding the cylinder head covers and then the exhaust manifolds. So for step 29, we're going to need our drive motor unit. We're going to need this small sprocket that is keyed and it is recessed. We're also going to need a screw for that. And we're going to need one of these metal washers. Now, if you remember when we took the springs off of the camshafts, these metal washers were retaining those springs. So first we're going to take our motor and our sprocket, and we are going to fit it on the drive here, the drive wheel. Then we are going to take our washer, set it there. Then we're going to take our screw and we're going to attach this gear with this screw. All right, there we go. Next, we're going to bring over our engine block and we're going to have it upside down and situated just this way. Now, if you look in here, you're going to see that main drive sprocket in there. That's what's going to mesh up to this. So we're just, make sure you don't kink your wires. You just want to set this in here. Actually, it could be easier if we opened up this wire. Straighten it out a little bit. Okay, and then we're just going to sit our motor down in this recessed area, and then we're going to attach this with 3 screws here, here, and here to hold it in place. And we'll tighten those up. Okay. All right. And that is the end of that step. Now for the next step, we're going to be installing these cylinder head covers, but you know, these parts have some really nice raised detail on them, and because they're transparent, they kind of just disappear. So I'm going to take a little creative liberty here and do something special with these. So I'm going to use my acrylic paint pen, and I'm just going to very carefully just paint the tops of all those cooling fins, maybe around the bolt too. Yeah, I think that's going to make that stand out and look really nice. And here we have those parts detailed with some nice red color on there. I picked red because the fan on this kit is red. So yeah, I like that. I also highlighted where it says Porsche on top here. Really like how that came out. Now, you don't have to do this. This is just what I wanted to do. You can do whatever you want on yours, but I just like how this makes it stand out a little better. So to attach these parts to the engine, we're just going to take our parts. Now this is part number 57. We're just going to fit it right on here like so. And we're going to secure this with 6 screws. All right. And that part is in place. And I really like how that looks. Okay, for the next part, we're going to flip this over to make it easier. And this is part number 58. This goes on just like this. And we're going to attach that with 6 screws. And those are now on. And I think that looks really good. Now, one thing I do want to mention, if you're following along with the instructions, after we install the covers for the heads on this side, they don't tell you to do that on this side. So we're going to go over that now. So this is part number 57, and this is just like we did on the other side. It's going to fit on the cylinder head like so. And that's going to be attached with 6 screws. Get that one started. And then the other one is part number 58. And that'll just sit on here like this and attach with 6 screws. And that's the end of that extra step. So for this step, we're going to assemble the lower exhaust manifold. Now these are part 30 and 31. And these just basically fit together like so. And then we'll secure this with 4 screws. And 4. Now we're going to bring our engine back over. With our engine upside down again, we're going to take our exhaust manifold, and you'll see 3 posts right here on this side of the cylinder head. And those are going to match up with these. So we're just going to set this down like this. And we'll secure that with 3 screws. Do the middle one first. And we'll tighten those up. Oh, gonna need a skinny screwdriver for that. Okay, and that's the end of that step, and that's the end of this stage. In section 17, we're going to be continuing on to assemble the exhaust and also the muffler on both sides. So for step 32, we're going to need these 2 parts. These are part number 24 and 23. Now these 2 snap together like so. They're a really strong friction fit. And we're going to be holding this unit together with 1 screw. Just put this in here like this. And there's that one. Now we're also going to do the other side. This is part number 21 and 22. And then we'll secure this with 1 screw. We're going to bring our engine back over and flip it over. This is the exhaust manifold we put on before. So we want to take the first exhaust pipe that we created just a moment ago. And this is going to fit in this side right here. It just slips in there, and then we'll secure it with 3 screws. Just like that. Now for the other side of the exhaust manifold, we're going to use part number 28 and 29. And just like we did on the last one, we're just going to snap those together and secure those with 3 screws. Actually, I said 3 screws, but it's actually 4 screws. Okay, now we're going to take this, bring our engine back over, and we're going to attach this to the engine just like we did before. So you've got these 3 posts here are going to match up to these 3 posts on the bottom of the cylinder head. Like so. And then we'll attach that with 3 screws. Okay. Now we're going to take our other exhaust pipe, and just like the last time, we're going to slide this in here and then attach it with 3 screws. Now we're going to set that aside. Now we're going to build the muffler with these 2 parts, and this is 19 and 20. So these just simply snap together like so, and then we'll hold this together with 3 screws. All right, so on the bottom, you're going to want to put a screw in this hole, and this hole. Make sure they're nice and tight. And that is our muffler. And I missed a screw. We also need to put 1 screw right here at the tailpipe. That's going to hold that together. Okay, Now, I am going to take a little bit of creative liberty again, and I'm going to paint the inside of that exhaust pipe flat black. All right, with that painted black, that looks so much better. Now, we're going to take our muffler and we're going to attach it to our engine. So to do that, we're going to place these two portions of the exhaust pipe into these ports here, and this flange is going to connect right here. So we'll just get this slid in like that. Make sure those are sitting on the flange. And then we're going to attach this with some screws here. And also here. Okay, and that's the end of those steps, and that's the end of this stage. For stage 18, we're going to be adding the batteries to our display base, a sticker to the display base, and then we're going to be attaching the engine to the display base. So to add our batteries, we need to open up this little battery compartment. And this takes 3 AA batteries. Put the lid back on. And that's that. Here we have our little metallic label sticker here. It says Porsche 911 6-cylinder boxer, but it's kind of in English and German. Okay, that's fine. All right, so we are going to peel the back off of this. All right, then we'll just line this up here. All right. Now that looks really nice. Now we're going to set this aside. We're going to bring our engine back over. And then we will take our base, and the base has these 4 posts that are going to fit right on here, on these 4 posts on the bottom of the engine. So you want your muffler towards the back, and your label is also towards the back. So we'll just sit this on here. Make sure those all line up, and then we'll secure those with 4 screws. Better grip on those, make sure they're nice and tight. Okay, now we have our base on our engine, and that is the end of that stage. In section 19, we're going to be building up our cooling fan unit, attaching it to the engine, and then attaching a fan belt that will drive that fan. So here are our parts for the fan. They all come in one bag. Here we have the fan blade, the housing, and the back plate. We're also going to need one of the 2 metal washers, this pulley unit here, and the fan belt. Okay, to build our fan unit, first thing we have to do is put this cover on the back. Now this cover has a key here and a slot in here. It only goes on one way. So just line everything up with that slot, hold it in place, and we'll secure that with 2 screws from the back. Just like that. Next, we're going to take our fan, set it on this post, And we're going to take our pulley. Now the pulley has a notch in it. So what you want to do is just set the pulley on top of that post. If it sticks up a little bit like that, you just want to rotate it a little bit and it'll pop down. Then take your metal washer, place it in there, and we'll secure the fan with one screw. Now, you want that fan to move very free like that. If it doesn't, just loosen up that screw a little bit. For our next step, we're going to add the cooling fan to the engine. Now, this is just a friction fit, and it goes right in here. So we're just going to stick this here and snap it in place. Now we're going to take our last rubber fan belt, and we've got to run it around this pulley here. So just kind of dip it down in there. Kind of get it past the muffler, get it in the groove, and then we just want to put it around the fan like so. All right, just like that. And that's it for this stage. So for step 20, we are going to be inserting the spark plug wires into the cylinder heads. And then we'll be adding a little retaining clip to kind of control the spark plug wires. Now you'll want to take note here on the instructions because it's showing you which cylinders and what numbers they are. So 1, 2, 3. On the other side, we got 4, 5, 6. And on the distributor, they are numbered. So number 1 on the distributor goes to number 1 cylinder. Number 2 on the distributor goes to number 2 cylinder, and so forth. Okay. So we're going to take spark plug number 1, it's labeled 1 on the distributor, and this is cylinder number 1. So we're going to put this in here, push it all the way down, and then we're going to go to number 2, which is this one right here. Push that in here, all the way in. And then we're going to find number 3, which is down here. So we'll put number 3 in cylinder 3. And then we'll get number 4. Now number 4 is going to go on this side. So it's going to go up over here and then into this cylinder there. And then we're going to take number 5. And let's feed it through here so it's nice and organized. And we'll pass that over the cooling fan and into cylinder 5. And then lastly, number 6. Again, let's pass it through here, over the cooling fan, and into port 6. Okay, next we're going to take this little part here, and this is going to fit right on top of the cooling fan here. So first we want to get our wires together, feed them into this part. And then just attach it to the fan housing. And that's that. Now, just to tidy mine up a little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a zip tie, and I happen to have a red one. And I'm just going to zip tie these together right down here. Then I will clip off the extra. There we go. And on this side it looks fine. Okay, so that is the end of those steps, and that's the end of this stage. And here we are at stage 21, and this is our final stage. So for step 40, we're going to be building and installing the carburetors. And then step 41, we're going to be plugging in to the base. We're plugging in the unit into the base, and if everything goes well, we'll be trying it out. So for step 40, we're going to be using parts 15 and 16, and these are just pressure fit together, and then they'll be held together with 4 screws. Just get one started there. Then we'll tighten those up. Just like that. And now we'll be doing the same thing with the other one. Again, parts 15 and 16. And there we have our 2 carburetor assemblies. Now we get to bring our engine back over. Set it here like so. Now we're going to take one of our carburetor assemblies, and these simply press fit right onto these 3 lugs with, on this side it's smooth, but we have this detail facing out. So we'll just set those on there, press them in place, and then the same thing with the other side. So now we're going to be plugging the distributor and the electric motor into our base. So on the bottom of the base, you have 3 ports, 2 smaller ones and 1 larger one. Now this first one here is going to be for the motor plug. So the wire coming off the electric motor underneath, we're going to put in here, like so. The second one is going to be for the line coming from the distributor. And the third one is actually for an audio output. So you could plug in a large speaker to this to make everything sound better. And that is the last step in that. And that is the end of this stage. And here it is, friends, the completed 6-cylinder Porsche 911 Boxer engine from Franz and Makerhaus. Once again, I want to thank my friends at Makerhaus for sending this into the channel. I really appreciate it. And this really is a good product. The instructions are pretty well laid out. There are a couple inconsistencies, as I pointed out during the build. So if you're just patient and take your time, read ahead in the instructions, this will go together, no problem. So this kit's a little different than the previous one I did. The previous one, you hit the button, the engine runs, the sounds go, it runs for about 30 seconds and that's it. This one actually has 4 stages. If you press the button once, the first stage is the engine just runs without any engine sound, so it's just the mechanical part of the engine running. If you press the button a second time, the engine runs and you can hear the engine sounds over the speaker. If you press the button a third time, all you hear are the sound effects playing. The engine's not turning or doing anything. And if you press the button a 4th time, everything stops. So we'll just real quickly go through those stages. And the start button is located right here. So we'll just hit it once. Everything's running. You hit it twice. You hear the sound. You hit it the 3rd time, the motor stops turning everything and you just hear the sounds. And the 4th time shuts everything off. So kind of cool that you can choose what do you want to hear. You want to hear the sounds of the engine, you want to see the thing running just by itself, or do you want the whole kit and caboodle? As for the details on this engine and things that I might have changed, well, it's a pretty good engine. I mean, it's a pretty good design. I do wish they would include a ignition coil maybe. that, like, if you look in the distributor here, the center post where the ignition coil lead would go is open. So I don't think it would be too difficult to add a small ignition coil and one extra line to plug that in, just for realism. But I'm kind of nitpicking here. Overall, it's a great kit. It was fun to build, and I really do like it. I do like how the details are there, and like I did with the extra paint here to make it just pop a little bit. I really like how that came out. I like that there's lots of places to see the internals of the engine. You can look through the top here and see the crank and pistons, the connecting rods. You can see the spark plugs lighting up as they fire. The cooling fan looks really neat. So yeah, overall, this is a great kit. Now, I have built some transparent engines in the past, and they're not as high quality as this, so you are paying for a premium kit with this particular kit. But if you're into Porsches or engines or models or anything like that, this is a great kit to get and build. If you have youngsters that want to get into mechanics and automobiles and learning how things work, another great kit for this. I would also use this kit in an educational space. It's a really good way to show and explain to people who aren't familiar with how these engines work, just how they do work and why they work. If you'd like to get one of these for your own, there is a scannable QR code on the screen where you can scan it and be taken to their Amazon store where you can purchase one of these. I'll also leave a link in the description below. So what do you guys think about this kit? Do you like it? Do you think it's cool? Do you think it's not? Have any of you built these before? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Well, that'll wrap up this episode, friends. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button down below. And until next time, friends, as always, just be safe out there and go build something.